Hey, animal enthusiasts and fellow herpetologists, Mr. Woe here, and today we're going to be setting up a paludarium. Let's get into it.
The paludarium we will be setting up today is going to be for a garter snake, so I'm taking lots of inspiration from areas where I've seen them in the wild. This includes shallow, rocky creeks, sometimes with waterfalls, where they hunt fish, tadpoles, and frogs. The materials I'm going to be using for this project include the Zoomed 20-gallon long top sliding enclosure, the Thrive 20-gallon 3D slate background, which I will be slightly modifying, Great Stuff Pond and Stone black expanding foam, since this will be exposed to water, brown 100% silicone and caulk gun, lots of aquarium sponge, an aquarium water pump, 1/2 inch diameter tubing, lava rock, hydro balls, and activated carbon for the drainage layer. On top I'm using a garden weed blocking mesh, and for the substrate I'll be using a mix of Eco Earth, Reptisoil, and Zoomed forest floor. Lastly, for other decor, I'm using lots of wood, rocks, plant roots, and sand for the aquatic region, all of which I collected from the outdoors and sterilized by bleaching and sun drying. Also for the aquatic region, I'll use a mix of aquarium pebbles. I first start on the background where I attempted to superglue patches of live moss to hopefully grow and spread out. I later learned that the soil under the moss didn't adhere very well for some of the pieces and that the moss dries very quickly. For the tank, I start by measuring and marking a height for the terrestrial region. This height was marked for the sponge and cut to 75% of the tank's length. I also cut two other heights so that there could be a slight slope between the water and the land region. I then placed the background down to get an estimate of how much land space I can use, as well as to cut the side sponge pieces. I made two heights for the side sponges as well to create a slope. Once I liked how much terrestrial land space I had, I began siliconing down the sponges and siliconed them together so they wouldn't move. Afterwards, I placed down the waterfall pump and slid the wire through the designated backspace of the rock background. This had to be done first since I then siliconed the background onto the glass, making the pump unremovable. To hide the middle section between the two background pieces, I filled it with the black expanding foam and placed a few pieces of dried moss to adhere to it. Once the silicone and foam was cured, it was time to start the drainage layer. I first rinsed the hydro balls and placed them at the bottom for the base. On top of the hydro balls, I then added the lava rock to completely cover the pump, leaving just the flow region exposed so I can add the tubing. This can be adjusted and cut later. Lastly, I added a small amount of activated carbon spread out throughout the lava rock. I then cut the drainage mesh to cover the sponges and the front of the false bottom. To keep it from moving, I siliconed and folded the edges under the sponges. I also trimmed any excess mesh sticking out. I cut more pieces of mesh for the back and poked a hole to fit the tubing through. Next, I placed the outer rocks to get an idea of what I thought looked good. Once I liked the placement, I siliconed them down to the mesh. In between the crevices of the rocks, I filled it with the black expanding foam and then covered it with the pebbles and gravels before it could cure. Filling in the gaps and crevices with foam can help prevent animals from getting stuck in the rocks or going to the drainage layer. Once cured, I moved the tank onto my reptile rack. From here, I used the X-Acto knife to trim any excess expanding foam and make it look more naturalistic. I then began working on the aquatic region, first by adding these pond grasses, then the rocks and sand. Next, I added the water, which was around 3 gallons, and I used this opportunity to test the waterfall pump, which thankfully worked, but the motor was pretty loud. Now I began working on the terrestrial region, first by surrounding the tube and pump with sponges. I then put the tube through this wood piece that was in the snake's previous enclosure with ivy. I do want to note that common ivy can be considered toxic to certain herps such as lizards and frogs, which may accidentally ingest it, so be mindful of that if you plan on making a similar setup. Generally, it is safe for snakes. After this, I plugged in the pump and tried to cover the tube with moss and plant roots so it would trickle down and look more natural. Then I added some substrate of Eco Earth and Reptisoil. I added some more plants, and around the edges of the land region, I placed some more plant roots. Because the dirt releases some tannins, I did a quick water change, then I added springtails, forest floor, and some leaf litter to the substrate. I also added isopods and earthworms for the cleanup crew, although the garter will most likely eat the worms on occasion. By providing a basking spot and UVB light, at this point it was safe to add the snake, so here he is in his new enclosure with lots of enrichment. but I still wanted to add more. For the aquatic region, it was missing some plants, so I'm going to add a couple pieces of Anubias nana. I also felt that it needed a central branching piece for the animal to climb on. As you can see, in the aquatic region, I also have some mosquito fish for the snake to hunt. And now this was essentially the final product. Here the snake is striking a pose in front of the waterfall. By going through flowing water, it makes it easier for the snake when it's time to shed. By providing branches, it not only adds enrichment, but it creates a thermal gradient for the snake to get closer to the basking spot for more warmth, as well as greater access to UVB. While swimming, this was also the snake's first time seeing an aquatic plant, and it seemed to be very interested. So yeah guys, this is essentially how I set up this Waterfall Paludarium. This is an excellent setup for semi-aquatic frogs, juvenile caiman lizards, juvenile aquatic turtles, and certain semi-aquatic snakes. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have questions or suggestions, let me know in the comments. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!